Yo, what's going on? Hope you're doing well. Welcome to Shop Talk episode number 4. We are flying through these things. Thank you so much to everyone for the positive response on Shop Talk number 3, the clips versus flats video. Definitely pretty funny. The comment section was going off with some debate, so glad to see everyone getting into it in there. And for today, we're going to be breaking down my preferred Maxxis tire setup. And to start, I'm going to provide some backstory onto how I found my setup, and then at the end of the video, I'll discuss that exact setup, the tire pressures I run, and the compounds I run. So let's get into it. In my time of riding bikes, since I was just a kid, I have ran a variety of Maxxis tires, different treads, compounds, etc. And to be honest, the whole time I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea about the different models, compounds, whatever. However, eventually when I started riding hard enough to cause some problems and kind of notice some fine details of my bike setup, I dove really deep into finding which tires worked best for me. This whole process of finding out which tires works best for me began when I built up a new trail bike in 2021, right when I was starting to ride pretty darn hard, and I put on some EXO casing tires. My reason for this is that they come in a tan sidewall, which I think looks amazing. And on my first ride on that bike, we went to a very rocky trail. I chose a bad line, got a flat, and thus this whole process began. At this point in time, I was living in my van in southern Utah, and due to the storage constraints that come with living in a van, I had all of my extra bike parts sitting in a storage container. So I drove there and took a look through my tire bin, and I happened to have 2 double down tires, which were high roller 2s. Not the most commonly ran tire, but hey, I needed that extra flat protection that the double down casing provides, so I tossed them on. After a few weeks of rocking those tires here in southern Utah, I drove to New Hampshire for the summer, where I lived at Highland Mountain Bike Park and was ripping every day. The tires held their own, but at this point is right when I started to become a major bike nerd. I was watching a ton of bike checks of other pro riders, checking out what they were rocking, and I found that a lot of people were doing DHF in the front and DHR in the rear, or Assegai in the front and DHR in the rear. So naturally, I wanted to change up my setup. Once again, living in the van, limited storage, so I didn't have too many extra tires with me for the summer, and I was by no means a tire expert when I packed them up. So I opened up the small box of extra tires that I had, and I found in there a DHF and an Aggressor, both in the double down casing. I was stoked to try out some new tires, so I tossed them on, DHF front, Aggressor rear, but I was left with some curiosity of how the Assegai would perform and the DHR2, which I would learn about in the future. Overall, the DHF and Aggressor performed well. It was quite the step up from the dual high roller 2s. Gave me a lot of confidence out there on the trail, but I still wanted to try some new setups. So later that summer, when it came time to build a new trail bike, I had to order some new tires, and I went for the DHF in the front because I liked the way that felt on the other bike, and I went for the DHR2 in the rear because I was still curious as to how that tire performed after seeing so many other riders run it. So thankfully, I got the chance to test it out. The DHF DHR2 combo on this bike was pretty dreamy, and I could instantly see why so many people were running it. Just the old trusty setup works so well, and at this point I also started running some inserts. I had CushCore Pro in the front and rear tires of this bike. If you'd like to hear my thoughts on CushCore as a product, and if I am still running it today, I would recommend checking out Shop Talk episode number 2, which will be linked in the description. After this DHR2 wore out as a rear tire, I decided to toss on a Dissector as its replacement just to keep trying out some new tires. I liked the way the Dissector felt. However, it wasn't, drastically better than the DHR2. I thought the DHR2 worked really well in a variety of conditions. So moving forward, I just decided to stick with the DHR2. All of that said, I'm a lot more in tune with my bike these days, so I should give the Dissector another shot in the future. Heading into 2022, after a ton of learning about tires in 2021, I wanted to keep the ball rolling, so I built up my trail bike with an EXO Plus casing Assegai in the front and a DH casing DHF in the rear. All in all, this tire setup worked really well for me. I got a lot of confidence from the Assegai as a front tire and really liked the way that the EXO Plus casing felt. It was light but still supportive, and in the back, I really liked the way that the DHF felt, especially in steep bike park berms, and of course, the DH casing was super supportive. In contrast to this setup that I was running on my long travel trail bike, on my downhill bike, I was running DH casing, Assegai in the front, and DH casing DHR2 in the rear. This was really good for me because I was riding very similar trails on both bikes, just on various different days. So it was, not the most accurate testing, but some good kind of back-to-back feel of what I was getting out of both the different tire setups. I should also note that over the course of the summer, I did also try running an Assegai on the back of my downhill bike. However, I didn't personally gel with it too much. I found that when I started to lean over the back end of the bike, I just didn't prefer the way those side knobs felt when compared to the knobs on the DHR2. So I reverted back to that downhill casing DHR2 and kept riding along. For reference, here's a look at the different side knobs. Here they are on the DHR. You can see they're just the standard block. Then that knob with that 90-degree indent. Then over here on the DHF, you can see that it is actually the same. So the only difference are the middle treads on those two tires between the DHF and the DHR. However, on the Assegai, the side knobs are totally different, as you can see here, as well as the middle tread. After running all of those different tires in 2022, I felt like I was starting to feel pretty confident in how the different sidewalls felt, as well as the tread patterns, and really looked forward to building up some new bikes in 2023. When building up new bikes last year, I made the decision to commit to the Assegai as my front tire on all of my bikes and the DHR2 as the rear tire on all of my bikes. My reasoning for this is that the Assegai just gives me so much confidence. I love the way it feels when cornering, and I just love the way the tread pattern looks when I'm looking down at the tire, which may seem silly, but that's something I think about. And then in the rear, the DHR2 just feels great in so many different conditions. My reason for committing to just 2 tires to run on all of my bikes is I just wanted to learn one setup really, really well. I had a lot of fun testing different tires, but by the end, I just kind of wanted to settle in on something and learn how it would react in any or all conditions and just feel super confident with the tires that I had on my bike so that I would know what my traction was like riding in a variety of different situations. Now for what casings I ride, unlike with the tread patterns, I am by no means committed to one singular casing. I feel very confident running a variety of the Maxxis casings, and I feel that they all have their place. All in all, my favorite tire casing is the DH casing, which is the heaviest of the bunch, gives you the smoothest ride feel out there on the trail, and gives you the most rim protection. And as the name suggests, I do run that on my downhill bike, front and rear, all the time, and I will run that occasionally on some trail bikes. However, when you're looking to save some weight, I will switch to the double down casing, which is just a tad bit lighter than the DH casing, little less rim protection, a little bit more lively feeling on the trail. So I've got that mounted up front and rear on my Ibis HD6 over there. Definitely my favorite casing for trail bikes. And then sometimes as a front tire on my trail bikes, I will run the EXO Plus casing, which is quite a bit lighter than the double down casing, so I'll do this to save some weight, and it's definitely a more lively feel as a front tire than the double down casing. For tire pressures, my general philosophy is I try to go as low as possible so that I can have maximum traction out there on the trail, but not too low where I start dinging the rim. So at the moment, my general zone for my trail bike is I run 26.5 in the rear and 25.5 in the front. And on my downhill bike, because I'm riding some bigger drops and jumps, I will go 28 in the rear and 26.5 in the front. I'm super meticulous about those numbers, and I check with a digital gauge every single time that I ride. To wrap up, for rubber compounds, I mostly run the Max Grip compound, and sometimes I'll run the Max Terra compound. I don't have too strong of a preference either way, and I think that both are great. That's all for this episode of Shop Talk. This was a very heavily requested video, so I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them down below in the comments. I'll definitely get back to you. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate the support, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.